I'm a former officer with the Georgia Department of Corrections, and here with me tonight is Russell Zirkle, and he is a former correctional officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, unit manager, and deputy warden. So he left his career as the deputy warden of security at Valdosta State Prison, and we actually worked together for a little stint during my career, and his as well at Valdosta State Prison in 2017, 18, and 19, because that was the years that I was down there. So that's where he and I met, and then we have reconnected. Years later, as after we both left the department, kind of in about the same time frame. And this interview's been long overdue as far as me and him coming together on camera and just speaking about this whole situation going on in Georgia. So I appreciate you, Zirkle, for taking the time today and coming on. And I look forward to talking to you, brother.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, man. I'm glad to share some stories and some insight.
Yeah. So you and I both, because you early 2015, mid 2015, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I started in 2015 at Valdosta State Prison, and I think I was an officer for about 2.5 years. And I made sergeant in 2017, and I was a sergeant for about a year and a half. As a sergeant, I supervised a tier program. I was a shift sergeant. Worked various areas of the institution. And about a year and a half of that, I made lieutenant. I think as a lieutenant, I was about 6 months. I stayed as the tier program supervisor, the restrictive housing confinement supervisor. I was down there as a lieutenant for a few months, and then they moved me to being the OIC of a shift, which is typical of what they have you do as a lieutenant. And that was 2018, I want to say. Yeah, September or October of 2018. And yeah, from then on, man, I ran shifts. And 2020, March of 2020, I left Valdosta State Prison as a lieutenant. I was promoted to captain at Altry State Prison, and I was the chief of security there as the captain. I oversaw the every security staff member there at the institution. They fell up under my command, and I was responsible for the shift lieutenants, their successes and their development and implementation of policies. I was a member of the executive management team there. So, and then I was there for almost 3 years. Yeah, almost 3 years, and about 9 months of that I was actually deployed. I'm a current member of the United States Army Reserve. I was deployed for 9 months of that. I was in Guantanamo Bay. But so yeah, about 2 years of that I served as captain from 2020 until the beginning of 2023, and I left Altry State Prison, and I was at Valdosta State Prison. I was promoted to unit manager. I was in that position for a few months, and then I was offered the deputy warden of security job, and I served in that position for approximately 9 months, I think. And I left in December 2023 after some assessment of where I thought my career was going, what I thought of the agency, and what was best for me and my beliefs going forward.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting because it was around that time of 2020 when you're saying that you're getting promoted. So when you made lieutenant and you went to shift at Valdosta, because when I was OIC at Valdosta was late 2017, very early 2018, and then I think it was like March 2018 that I started that CERT team there
Mhm.
and went off shift. So how many officers did you have on your shifts when you were OIC from that whatever 2018 to 2020
when I
time frame? Like how did it look when you started as OIC, and did you see like a sharp decline or what?
when I started supervising this shit, well, I'll start it back to when I was a correctional officer. So when I was a correctional officer, it was about 40 something people, I believe, on my shift. I mean, I didn't even, if you were a rookie, you had to come in there a little early to make sure you had a place to sit. I mean, there was nowhere to even sit when I first started in 2015. And I think that was when it really started to take a downturn. But, that's kind of when it was still close to the peak staffing level. So there was 40 something people on the shift when I started as a CO. And I, I couldn't really I couldn't really correlate what the numbers were at the next 2 years, but then when I made lieutenant as a shift OIC, I think I usually ran it with like near the beginning was about 30 people, I want to say, between the main institution and the annex. It was about 30 people. Towards the end when I left, it got to be we were running it with like 22, 23 between the main institution and the annex. And when I left, I went to Altry and I saw what Altry was routinely operating with. I thought that maybe it was just that institution was, short staffed, and it blew me away because I think they were running the prison with like 8 or 9 people a shift, and I was like, wow, that's this is crazy. Like, how's this place still open? But that followed Valdosta soon after, so I think Valdosta when it took that real decline, that going from like 22 to 23 to like 6 or 7. That happened while I was gone as captain. So when I came back, it was like that when I came back.
Okay. So somewhere between 2020 and 2022, it went from even low 20s, which is not enough. You can't even, best of my memory, I think you needed maybe 26 over there on the main compound just to fill
Ye-
all the priority rooms. Or I can't remember, but I do remember that I could fill all the buildings and control rooms with about 27 or so. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
The way, yeah, when it got to about 22, 23, that was when you would get help from split shift for, H control, E control, J control, K control, all the lockdown buildings and the one unit that had the ACU unit. So that was about four of them right there that we were essentially like getting floated, getting borrowing staff from split shift. But as far as my staff, it was around 22, 23 every day.
okay.
Sometimes we would get people to do overtime. They would want to come in and, you just work the P car or the hospital or the control room or something. And so I would be able to send my staff to, down there to the control room. But that kind of fluctuated though, the overtime.
Yeah, 100%. So it was like that the whole time, pretty much, that you was at Altry, though, right? Where it's less than 10 officers for the whole compound.
Yeah, we got the periods here and there where we had 12 or 13, I think, after a big cadet class graduated from BCOT. I think one of our night shifts we had 14 at one point, and that was like the highest that we got when I was there. And I always try to make sure that I put more officers on the night shift than I did the day shift. And the day shift lieutenants,
100%.
they hated that, but I was just like, hey, listen, guys, I know y'all are mad because you only have 8 or 9, and they have 14, but you need people out here at the nighttime
Yeah, 100%.
because
And then during the day, at least during the week, you do have the split shift and the administration and all that are there that can help, bear the burden, so to speak, too.
absolutely.
So smart from a managerial perspective to try to put more officers on night shift, especially when you're looking at such severe, because that's not even enough. 14 is not enough for
Mm-mm.
ultra state prison whatsoever.
Yeah,
You know,
not yes.
even if all 14 are like top tier officers,
Hmm.
it still is not enough. You know, and you're talking
Absolutely.
about of that 14, probably over half of them don't even have a year of experience. You know,
Yeah. Funny enough, I for some reason I cannot remember the operational capacity of Valdosta as far as how much it would hold max. But I always remember Altry's was 1704. So,
wow.
you know,
So ultra's bigger than about Austin.
oh yeah. And I think at the time,
I think it was something like 1,100, 1,200, somewhere like that on the main compound at Valdosta. It was pretty low. It was one of the lowest prisons that I worked at.
yeah, but the thing about Valdosta and Ware and some other prisons is that at this at at the sake of having less, or I'm sorry, at the sake of having smaller housing units, that where there weren't 96 inmates in a dorm, like Smith State Prison or Telfair. That actually, that's what we had at Autry as well. At the sake of that, you would have more housing units. You had A, B, C, D, F2, G, H. I mean, that's a lot of housing units just spread. And regardless of how many inmates you got in the dorm, you still have to spread your staff out to properly supervise, the inmate population. So regardless of whether you put them in there 96 apiece or 50 apiece, you still have to put an officer over there. So that part is challenging, even though Valdosta only has 1,100. And to boot, those 11 or 1,200 are some of the most disruptive, discipline problem inmates in the state.
Yeah, hands down. Like I say that commonly when people ask me like, "What's the craziest prison?" I'll tell them like, "Look, Telfair was the worst as far as like gang wars and gang violence between the inmates and stuff like that." But as far as just like unruly, off the chain inmates, like Valdosta's hands down the most turned up camp that I've been at. Uh, for sure. So you're right about that. That it is very difficult. And another thing that about Valdosta that makes it difficult, at least from a managerial perspective, when you're short on men, especially, is that dang near half the compound is sick. You know,
Yeah, that
it's
that
like, man, you got what? It's like 8 buildings or something on the main compound
yeah,
that have sick. If you're counting each side,
yeah,
J1, J2, K1, K2, and then you got H2, which is the ACU, and then you got E1, E2, and then you got one of
F1.
the sides of the F as well. Yeah, F1. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of damn buildings out there.
And then you
And
got then you got
and that's what people cause problems,
and
most
th-
of the time.
and then you got the infirmary and medical.
That's right, and it's 24/7. So,
Hmm.
man, it's never a dull moment at Valdosta State Prison. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Like
luck.
working night shift, it was never a dull moment, even on night shift. Even at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's something going on at Valdosta.
Absolutely.
And
I still.
y'all have some cats, man. The cats out there, did they still have that problem with the cats when you left at the behind the kitchen and stuff?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, maybe they didn't have that problem at Telfair, but from my experience, any correctional institution you work at, you're going to have cats.
yeah.
You're going to have, yeah, because the inmates feed them, and there's a to an extent, food that's left out or in the trash that those feral cats. I still work in corrections. I'll exclude the agency that I work for, but they're really bad at the institution I work at. Really
Really?
bad. I mean, they're all over. There must be at least like 19 cats that I can distinctly identify. Like, okay, that's that cat,
Wow.
and they're just all running
Yeah, I
around, man.
remember. Yeah, they probably should do something about that. Get them, maybe animal control or something. That's a lot. Valdosta was the worst that I seen. I've seen them. Now at Telfair was the best. Telfair, it was rare that you see a cat around there for some
Mm-hmm.
reason, whatever reason. But Valdosta was the worst, and then Johnson was pretty bad. But Valdosta was almost like what you're saying, man. Especially early in the morning when I would go out there, because at least when I became the OIC, man, you had to go back there and manually open that gate at the back gate every
Mm-hmm.
every time that the that the people come to get the trays and stuff. So I would go back there a lot and do it. Man, they would be cats running and jumping everywhere when I would go, make that walk through the from the back of the kitchen out to the back gate. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but go ahead.
but yeah, one of my coworkers, he kind of gives me some some war stories from some of the institution he's worked at, and some of the worst he's seen, and does his best to try to spook me, like, oh, this place is different, man, you just don't know, like, listen, buddy, I don't doubt you that it's different. I don't doubt you that it has its own unique challenges, but if you could survive at Valdosta State Prison, you could survive anywhere. I'm convinced.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, I'll second that. I tell you, man, Valdosta, it really did prepare me good, and not only that, working in the tier, we're talking off camera about that. And, working in the tier prepared me well for as far as like dealing with people that are hard to manage,
Hmm.
and Valdosta was like the real rite of passage.
Oh yeah.
So it's like you say, man, if you can deal with that, you can deal with anything because like at Valdosta. The things that shocked me the most was the stuff that they would do to themselves. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
dude, the self injury and was just off the wall. You know,
What
with the level of it.
what's the wildest thing that you saw an inmate do to themselves?
I seen a guy down there. I think it was J building, but it might have been K. It was one of the two. And he was sitting there at the door when I came by, and he was like, "You better get the warden down here right now, or I'm gonna eat my arm." And he was talking all this about eating his arm, and I was like, "Dude, man, you're gonna have to give me a minute. Like, I can't get the warden down here immediately." He's talking about 3 minutes or something like that. And then when he said that, he was pretty much like threatening me, like that he was going to eat his arm. And I was like, "Look, man, I'm gonna go over there and call up or whatever, but uh, I can go on and tell you he's not going to be here in 3 minutes. Like I can just tell you that because and I knew that even coming into Valdosta, but it made it like it verified it for me as time went on that the best thing you can do with people like that is be honest with them, even if it's something they don't want to hear, But this particular time, it didn't talk him down none, to be honest with him. Like he went to eating his arm, so he started biting on his arm. He got one bite out and took it down, and then he got another big chunk in his
Mm,
mouth, and then he jerked that way, and I seen the dang stuff come up on that side, and then he jerked the other way,
mm,
and it came off, and then he had it in his mouth, and he's looking at me, and by this point, I'm calling the radio, I'm telling him we're gonna need medical and this and that, because he's bleeding and all, and I can see that he's already injured himself. So I'm on the radio, and he's just sitting there looking at me doing all this. After he gets that big chunk ripped out of his arm, he jizzes his lips like that, and I didn't know it. He had a paper clip in his hand,
mm.
so he took his lips like that and jobbed that thing up through
Oof.
both, pulled it this way and did it like this. He at least two twists. He twisted the thing up. He had his lips was sewed shut when he did that, and then so I took him up to medical. They cut the cut the paper clip, and he didn't have that piece of meat in his mouth anymore. So I guess, well, I know pretty much that he swallowed it. So he
Hmm.
ate a piece of his arm. I mean, that was kind of like the most shocking, but like the most disturbing. I mean, anytime that they would have a large amount of blood loss in a little small cell,
Hmm.
like I never really liked the smell of that. I mean, so those were kind of because it's a very distinct smell when you got like several quarts of blood, in a room from a guy. And then when the guys would mutilate their penis and stuff like that, like their sex organs, like that was kind of disturbing, something that I'd never seen before going about Austin.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I don't know if that's a good answer. It's really not one. It's really like top five, especially when you're dealing with Val Austin.
That's
I
a
mean, I
challenge.
went by cell one time in ACU, man. There was a guy. I it's bad laughing about this now, but you have to laugh, man, sometimes with stuff like this just to keep your sanity and stuff. But I went by the cell and I looked in, and man, this dude's rolling turd. He's got a turd that he's eating it, and he's got it rubbed all over the wall in there. He's sitting
Hmm.
back there masturbating. He's playing with himself at the back of the cell, rolling the turd in and out of his mouth and stuff. Got dookie all over him. So, I mean, it'll be hard to say the top one, but yeah, all the top 10 are all at Valdosta. I can tell you that.
That wasn't listed on the application that I was going to have to deal with.
No, yeah, they didn't.
Yeah,
Nope.
I think the challenging thing about a place like Valdosta is that you're dealing with several different populations. So it's almost like you have multiple prisons in that one. You have the annex, which is easy to manage as a standalone. I mean, there's only like 225 inmates over there, and medium security. A lot of them go out the gate to do work details. Um, but then you got the main institution, you got mental health, you've got long term segregation, restrictive housing, you've got normal restrictive housing, tier one. You've got a faith based dorm, you've got chronic medical care inmates up in the infirmary. You got a lot of gang members and gang violence that happens there. And mixing mental health with gang violence and inmates that are behavioral issues is never a good combination. That's the thing I think that set Valdosta apart. Like you got Smith, you got Telfair, you got Ware, you got Hancock, you got all these different level five prisons that, and I think a lot of them have actually added mental health now. So who knows how they are? But back
Telfair
then,
did, and I seen that. I seen the difference with Telfair between no mental health and just level twos. Though most of them have
mhm.
only got up to level two. They don't do level three.
That's one of the problems with Georgia's prisons, I think, as well, is like they've turned their prisons into an outpatient mental health facility. Like I get it; it's a challenging issue to resolve, but I think the way they went about it, they enabled inmates to manipulate the system. They allowed inmates to bend it to their will. As far as back in the day, oh, if I'm an inmate, I don't want to go to Smith State Prison, because Smith State Prison had a reputation of being a really tough place to live. If I don't want to go there, I can just play mental health, and maybe I can go to ACU at Baldwin, or at Valdosta or something. But back then they used to be able to play the system, like, and now all these different prisons that have mental health. I don't think it's not as easy as they're making it out to be. Like, oh, we're going to make every prison have mental health. Well, the reason that you only had a few of them before is because you had trained staff at those facilities that, to a degree, know how to deal with them. But how can you guarantee that you're going to be able to meet the capabilities to deal with a mental health population at Smith State Prison or at Hayes State Prison? Or, well, Hayes State Prison had mental health. Smith, Macon State Prison, some of the different level five institutions. How do you know you're going to be able to have the capabilities to deal with it? You're going to have to establish an entire department of mental health counselors, and you're going to have to ensure you have 24-hour medical, no matter what. And you might have to create an ACU unit, a CSU unit, so on. So and there's just a lot that comes with that. So I don't.
100%.
They just thought it was like easy peasy. Like, no, we'll just designate some beds and change
And what
some.
they actually ended up doing was, instead of making ACUs and stuff at these facilities, what they did, at least at Telfair, and then they did this as well at Johnson, was they just made these things called observation cells.
Mm-hmm.
So they were essentially like an ACU cell, but it didn't have its own standalone thing like ACUs normally do, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just in lockdown. It was just a few of the
Yeah.
cells in lockdown. And
Yeah.
that's all fine and dandy when you got plenty of when you have the lockdowns fully staffed. But when
Mm-hmm.
you have when you have the lockdowns themselves abandoned and these officers floating between lockdowns and you have them floating onto the compound to help count and feed and all that, then you end up with situations where even these people that are on quote unquote observation, man, that they're going without their checks, too, just because the
Mm-hmm.
buildings themselves are just abandoned like that. But
Yeah.
but that was a huge problem, like statewide, man. That's why I asked you that earlier, like, because I was wondering about when it got like that about Austin, because I knew that it wasn't like that when I left in late 2019. They were having a lot of problems, but it wasn't. I mean, they was 20 something officers at least on each ship, and
Mm-hmm.
like at bad Telfair though, man, already in late 2019 it was three, four, two. I mean, at the whole compound.
Yeah.
So but it was very shocking and to me to see that go pretty much statewide at all your major
Mm-hmm.
prisons anyway. Right there around that same time. And me, I was looking at it more of ACA and stuff because I knew the ACA was a big like commonality with all this stuff because that was when ACA started being implemented 2018 when they started really trying to change the policies and all that. And did you notice anything like that about Asta? Because they really I didn't get to see the compound that much after they. Matter of fact, I didn't. They had just changed the DR process rule for like 3 weeks by the time I made an instructor down at Valdosta. So, did y'all have a problem with being able to get DRs through the system when they changed all those DR policies and went from 30 days to 7 days, and you had a lot of other things that changed with the DR process?
Yeah.
Did y'all have problems with that? Did you have things like where these guys their DRs were getting thrown out, even though they were sometimes serious DRs, like maybe projecting bodily fluids and stuff like that?
Hold on 1 second. Yeah, we absolutely did. To answer your question, I didn't actually know that it was ACA was the reason. I was aware that they changed the requirements, and I just remember we had a new DR investigator at the time, and she was splitting time between doing that and being pulled to work posts during the week. And I just remember a ton of DRs were getting thrown out because they were expiring. They were, being outside the adjudication process. So, that I do remember that happening. The interesting thing though about the ACA accreditation period for Georgia is that there are certain clauses and requirements in ACA for proper staffing levels. Now that can be an ambiguous term, concept to interpret, but it doesn't take a genius to look at a post roster and be like, you have 5 people to run, to supervise 1,200 inmates. Like, what are we doing? Like that. It doesn't take a genius, but how they got away with it, I believe, is that they were they were they were saying that one officer would cover, would supervise this dorm and this dorm, so that in theory everything was covered, but they were completely putting it all on the officer, which violating policy and violating their own policy. Honestly, like close security inmates are supposed to have constant supervision at all times.
Yeah,
They're supposed
otherwise
they're
they wouldn't be classified as close security.
right.
You know?
Right. So they're violating their own policy, like moving the goalposts for their own policy. And I don't understand. Um, like I'd say they started trimming the fat as far as like how they man the post. They started doing that while I was a CO and when I was a sergeant. They went from I remember C and D building at Valdosta, especially when I started. If you worked over there, at least one of those buildings had 2 officers assigned to the floor, one for each side, at least one, and if not both, depending on what your staffing level that day was. But if you, D building used to be the roughest one, and they would have an officer for D1, an officer for D2, and an officer in D control. So you went from that to, okay, well, about 50-50 shot the days when I would come in, depending on who called in, who wasn't at work, whatever. Some days I would have to get somebody to run, one officer run the floor for C and D. And I really try to like sparingly do that. Like only really when I had to, I really didn't like to do that. I'd send one of my sergeants that like if I had the choice of like, okay, I'm only left with, this one post that isn't, manned to at least my standard, which was like officer in the control room, officer run the floor for each building, not one for C, one for D. Well, if I got in a pickle where, I don't have anybody else, so I could have this officer run C and D, well, I'll send my sergeant down there. Like I'm not keeping my sergeant off post just to do paperwork and stuff. Like
Yeah,
some lieutenants did that. I didn't agree with that. Like I'll
yeah,
send all y'all down to work the buildings before, I make one officer supervise more inmates than they have to. And I see somebody in the
yeah.
comments said The night shift and weekends is when they leave them now with the least, if not completely abandoned. She's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Like that and that's what I was saying about when I was at Alltree. I used to make it a point to put people on night shift, and a lot of people, not just the lieutenants, but some of my supervisor and coworkers, disagreed with that. But because they're just looking out for themselves, like, oh, we want to have people here during the day that are really good and reliable, that we can, if we got a call for an inmate to be sent up, we can get it done. If we want to, we want somebody that's going to be out on the, the quote unquote flat top, making the inmates tuck their shirts in and blah blah blah. But like, guys, like, at the end of the day, I understand all that, but we want good officers on every shift. But if and enough good officers, but it comes down to it, we're going to put more people on a night shift, because I'm not there most of the time on night shift, and I want I want to at least somewhat be able to feel like the facility that they can safely run it, and that's a bit exaggerated these days, but I felt better about
At least
having.
you at least don't want to be in a situation where one inmate can just take out everybody on the whole shift.
Right.
You
And
don't want to end up in a situation like that on night shift
right.
because there's not any backup.
Right. And she said something real there too during the day, is for sure. Yeah, absolutely. They would bring all the different people. They would communicate to the split shift, the admin shift supervisor, and say, hey, listen, I need so and so to go to this unit, so and so to go to that unit, especially when exec staff were visiting. Like, they would never make like unannounced visits. Like, they might pop up on you, so to speak, like, hey, I'm an hour out. That's about the most they would do, but they would rarely do that. Most of the time they would tell you like a few days in advance. So, they would just scramble to, get inmates cutting the grass, get inmates to, to the barber shop, and
Yeah, yeah.
that very day they would, or they would have inmates painting the walls and the cells and stuff like that. I mean, they would do all this stuff to, to fix up the dog and pony show. And at the time, especially, we did it at Alltree as well. um and when I was at Alltree, it was a little more, it was a little bit easier to swallow, the way it was a little bit of a easier pill to swallow, the way we were staffing it, when you considered the kind of inmates. It doesn't make it right, but I'd rather be staffing a prison with the population that we had there than the one that we had at Valdosta. Because when I first got there at Alltree, like I said, the capacity was like 1704, and you had a lifers dorm, you had general population, you had, I think H building was, I think that was about it, but it was mostly just general population, lifers dorm, and administrative segregation, restrictive housing. But it wasn't a super challenging population, but it was a lot of inmates. Um, but at the end of the day, when somebody was coming, we do everything in our power to just scrape stuff up and make it look good for them. And you know, without a better way to say it, like, just make it a point to kiss their ass, like, show them what they want to show them what they want to see versus what they need to see. But it was like, at the end of the day, holistically, it didn't matter if they saw it regardless, because they were just going to get mad and just be offended that you didn't fix it up for them. you know you got you also got to consider the people that are inspecting, what the product is. Like, if the person that's inspecting it is not going to do anything, or is, doesn't care, or is, like, to their core an unethical person, and they're just going to turn a blind eye to it, maintain, the thing that I can't stand the most for somebody in management is plausible deniability. And what plausible deniability is when you can prove that you didn't know about something, even though you really did know about it, but you made it a point to, like, that my name's been and I ain't in it, and if you're in management, you can't do that. Like, you cannot do that. You absolutely have to know everything that's going on, and you have to respond appropriately. And so I think even the regional directors, like, if they came, even if they did see what they needed to see, they're not going to do anything. They're just going to cuss the warden out, and telling him tell him that he needs to fix his facility up, and that if he has to do his job for him, he will. He's just gonna like chastise him. And I remember when I was at Valdosta, this is really the point where I knew that I was gonna leave. Everybody's kind of got that point, I think. Like, even if you're feeling that way, you probably have one moment that you can point to, like, okay, all right, this is when I really decided. I knew. And if anybody that knows me knows, I was very passionate about my career with the Georgia Department of Corrections. I'm really qualified as far as like um, what things I have on my resume that could I could land a job making a lot of money. I mean, I have a top secret security clearance. I'm an interrogator in the military, and I could be doing something that lands me a lot more money. But this is a family job for me. Like, my dad retired from Georgia Department of Corrections, and he worked at Hayes State Prison, at Valdosta State Prison, and he retired as assistant superintendent at Patton PDC, which is a, a a sister facility for Valdosta. But it was a family business for me, and I loved it. I loved what I did, and that's the job I had the most fun in overall. But it came to a point where I realized these people are not on the same page with how I view corrections, and what right is right and wrong is wrong. Like, the moment I can really point to is when we had a regional director, and I'll say his name, like Jermaine White. Like, I don't care if he sees that I'm calling him. I don't care. Like, he was the regional director. He comes down and he does a regional inspection, and we mostly fix it up to what he wanted to see. But a lot of inmates didn't have haircuts and stuff. Like, it was probably not the best inspection, to be honest. But calls us up to the conference room, and proceeds to tell us what we can do better and whatnot. And a coworker of mine, and you know I normally would just shut up and not say anything to those regional directors, because I knew it was just pointless. But my coworker, he says, so we're trying to do the best that we can, and we're working with the staffing that we got, and we're critically understaffed. We're just doing the best that we can, and Mr. White, he responds with, well, that's not an excuse. And if I was the warden here, and or if I was in y'all's position, I could do more with what y'all have. And if you like that, I could send you a column that I wrote of how to run a correctional facility when you're understaffed. And he basically just blew it off, like, you know and I was like, this is the guy that is supervising this region. If that's how he thinks, then that imagine how his boss thinks, and imagine how his boss's boss thinks. So that's the moment where I realized, like, I'm deputy warden of security, and I'm doing this job to try to make a difference, to try to change things, and hopefully I'll get to the top, and like I'll be able to run this thing the way I know that it should be run. And I enjoyed supervising people, but at the end of the day, there was a point where I was like, what's the point? Like, I could become a warden. What am I going to be, a warden, and get micromanaged by some regional director who, tells me what to do and how to do it? And what am I going to become, a regional director only for, me to just face constant heat and, um, backlash from just trying to do the right thing. If you're trying to do the right thing in Georgia Department of Corrections, you're gonna get you're gonna get pushed out because they don't want the right thing.
Right? They want the show, you know,
Yeah,
like you're talking about.
absolutely.
They want to just be quiet, do the show, and then don't complain about the apocalyptic conditions that we are in, the
Yeah,
historically bad conditions that these prisons are in. You know,
yeah. I think I saw something the other day. I think it was AI, but it was like ranking the worst Department of Corrections in the nation, and I think Georgia was like number one. Like, you had
yeah.
Alabama behind that. I think
And then
Mississippi Department of,
BOP.
yeah, and Georgia was at the top of that. And actually, the Department of Justice, they put out a findings report in October of 2024. It's an article online. Anybody can read it. And it's 82 pages long, and it outlines all of the different problems that they found between prisons in Georgia for, I think it was between 2018 and 2021, I want to say. And it was a very detailed report. It
Yes.
was a very detailed report, detailing all the different problems and critical lapses in security and in uh, good judgment corrections, all around Georgia prisons. And man, and I tell you, like everything in that everything in that findings report was accurate. I mean, to a T. And it shocked me. I was like, how did they know all of these things? Like, I don't know how they got their information. I don't know how they collected all of that and got all the facts that they did. Some of that stuff would be public information, but a lot of that was, like real on-site, boots on ground um, insight. Great read, man. 82 pages. I think the last 10 or 15 pages of it are bullet point solutions to some of the problems. So maybe about 65, 70 of that's actual, reports. Um, but yeah, I mean, and actually, when they put out that findings report, GDC, they responded to it, and for lack of a better way of describing it, they essentially told Department of Justice to fuck off.
Yeah.
They basically said, like, there was like three main points in their response. It was like, number one, a lot of those things you put in there aren't true. Number two, we're working to resolve some of the issues that we have, and some of the same issues we're facing, different agencies are facing around the nation, et cetera. And then third, like the agency that's under the Department of Justice supervision, Bureau of Prisons, has its own issues. So, kind of like a don't throw rocks when you're in a glass house kind of thing, you know.
Or just
But
kicking the can down the road too, instead of taking accountability for what's going on in your prison.
absolutely. And there's a culture in GDC as well of, your wardens, they feel like they want their prison to look the best that it can so that it looks like they're doing a good job. They feel like if it looks like their prison has problems, then that's going to hurt their career. That's going to make them look like they're not a good warden, or, that they're not doing their job, and it'll hold them from their next promotion, or, wherever they're trying to do in their career, it's going to affect them. They're worried about their reputation. They're worried about their tenure um, as a warden, or whatever their next step might. They're worried about that. So they'll do whatever they can to make it look like they're doing a good job, instead of like transparency, like full transparency, and like, you know, being open about the problems that are faced, and, the exact figures that are faced, the exact um, monster that they're facing. They're completely apathetic to it, and
100%.
there was actually a guy that I won't name him, but he was deputy warden at Valdosta, and he worked in special operations for a good amount of time. And I remember when he got out of that position and he came back to special operations, and I believe I was at Autry at the time. I was captain, and at Ware State Prison, you had a riot, that major disturbance at Ware State Prison in 2020. And I was asking him about it when they did the facility inspection at Autry, and he was telling, "Oh yeah, they're good now, and they got this many officers on day shift, and it was some crazy number, like, oh yeah, they got 26 officers per shift." I was like, "No, that's not possible. Like, what are you looking at? Because there's no way, guy. I know people that work the night shift the night that disturbance happened. That's not possible." And so my point is, like, I think that span of influence of, corruption and apathy and um, ability to just turn a blind eye to things. And I thought this dude was a really good guy. Like, I really did. Like, he knew my father. He worked with him back in the day when he um, worked at a close security facility with him. So I thought a lot of him. And when I'm hearing him respond, I'm like, they've got you believing this. They've got you drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
So that really blew me away. And I could spend all day long talking about the apathy and the attitude they have towards things. And
It,
me,
the people in the DOJ used a good word when they said, when they put that, when it says in there talking about deliberate indifference, that they show
absolutely.
deliberate indifference. you know. And this is
No,
what we're
yeah.
talking about here. It's just that they don't give a crap about the staff or the inmates. You know, they're indifferent
Hmm.
about it. If you get effed up and hurt in there in these conditions, then too bad for you. You know, it don't matter whether you're inmate,
Absolutely.
officer, regular, non-security staff. And so here you're bringing up the situation in 2020, and that was one of the situations that when it happened, um, us because I was at Telfair supervising the tier program at that time when that happened in 2020, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is it. Like they're now gonna bring somebody in because just like Ware was running when they had the ride, like we were already like that at Telfair too. And I was like, man, any day that this can happen, like this really can happen to us out here. Like
Hmm.
there are about four of us. Like, man, one of these gangs, all it would take is one, a half of them to really ride on us like that, and it's over, man. Like we're not capable of securing this prison out here with four people, and three of them are female, or even if all of them are male, you're still, just completely unprepared for what you're faced with, and
Absolutely. I think
man,
I think to a degree, no matter if you're fully staffed or understaffed, there's a bit of a I won't say placebo, but there's a bit of an illusion of control that we have, even
yeah,
if you have enough staff. Because I don't know if you ever watched that documentary series, Hard Time, but if you have, and this was at Hayes State Prison, if 1,400 inmates decide they don't want to be there, how are how are you going to stop them? Because even if you are fully staffed, you're outnumbered, so greatly. The inmate, you maintain that illusion of control. That even though it's just you and maybe one other officer that's working the floor of whatever unit that you're working in. Like the inmates know that you're running it, even if you're just one or two people. Like there's that illusion of control that GDC maintained for years. That even when the inmates had the capacity to do things, they wouldn't cross that threshold. And once something like that happened, you knew there's no stopping anything. There's no holds barred at this point. All bets are off. And you thought that was the extent of what they would do, but then you hear about what happened at Smith State Prison years later, and that was a
100%.
threshold I actually never thought would the inmates would cross, because even the inmates don't want firearms in the prison, because they know even if one of them is able to escape, one or two of them is able to escape, or whatever they're able to do with that firearm, like we're going to get the prison back and there's going to be dire consequences. So that's a threshold that, and they realize that they can, a gang can control the prison or housing unit, even without a firearm. So that's one threshold I thought they would never cross until they did, because I mean, when that happened, I really said all bets are off.
Yeah,
And you realize more and more, with the experience now that I have between different agencies and my experience in Georgia. Like you start to after a while of running the prison with 20 something officers when I was a lieutenant, or what they were running it with when I most recently was employed there. Like you start to think, well, okay, I can run this prison with this many people, this is how I'm going to do it. But in actuality, those prisons were designed to be staffed the way that they were, years and years ago. They were designed to be run like that. Even the roles where you think a person might be extra, they had something to do. Okay, we're gonna search this area. We're gonna conduct shakedowns. We're gonna test um, the perimeter defense system more often. We're gonna test the metal detection system in our front entry area. We're gonna, like, there's all different things that are supposed to be done that you used to have a guy for that, so to speak. Not necessarily a male, but you used to have somebody for everything that had to be done in the facility. But now you don't have enough people to even remotely start to um, do all the things that have to be done in a prison to keep it running safely and securely. You don't have nearly enough people.
like not even a fraction of what you need, really.
Hmm.
and then you end up with all kind of stuff happen. I mean,
Absolutely.
we, we had a guy at Johnson that we was going around on inspection. There was only me and the warden going on inspection. I was the cert commander there at this time. It's like 2023, and we go by the cell, and this guy's got a big pipe in his waistband, and so he's got the pipe. He won't give it to me. He won't give it to the warden, and we didn't have pepper spray during that time either because there were several stints. I'm sure it's probably like that at Altry and Valdosta too, where we straight up ran out of pepper spray. Like we didn't have none of the big Fogger cans. We were just completely out during the riots in the civilian life during that time too. They had the police buying up all the pepper spray, but so we were out
Hmm.
of pepper spray, and there. I was the only male there that day besides him,
Hmm.
and he's not ready to suit up and go in and do a cell extraction. So
Hmm.
I go up there. I tell him, I'm like, look, man, you're gonna have to call tax squad or something. Like, I need three other men that I can lead in here and do a cell extraction with this
Hmm.
guy. And he was like, get with the female unit manager and have her come here because we was kind of all close together. I went and got her and came over there, and he was like, "Well, go down there and see if you can sweet talk this guy out of that pipe and stuff." And I'm like, "Dang, man!" I'm sitting
It's
there
a
looking at
joke.
this situation. I'm like, "Dude, man, we can't. We are literally out here in a position where we cannot handle one inmate with a pipe." One inmate
Hmm.
that's got something he's supposed to have. If he decides he's not gonna give it to you, like you don't even have a team that you can go in on and this guy was in lockdown. So come to find out later on, she tried to get it from him. He still wouldn't give it to her. That next day, which was when I found out that the guy didn't give her the pipe, a guy tried to stab me in ID, and I got to tussling with him in ID, got the knife from him, shot him with a taser, all that. It was a big use of force that I had with this guy up in ID that tried to stab me. Then, so I get that guy that tried to stab me, which was that next day after this incident with the pipe guy. Get him, put him in lockdown, put it on the sheet, go up. I tell the deputy warden that was there, like, hey, look, this situation just happened. Like, we need to make sure we don't let him out of lockdown. Because they was already having weekend lists by this point where they
Hmm.
let people out on the weekend to put people in because there's people constantly trying to put themselves on the door and stuff when these
Yeah.
compounds, the compound's so dangerous that stuff like that's happening all the time. But anyway, so I come back in that next Monday because I think that was on a Friday when that happened with the guy that tried to stab me, and he had threatened females before because that's how me and him got into it was because I was called to the situation because he was already threatening females, and then it's when
Hmm.
I came up that obviously it went ahead and went down when I came up, but so that next Monday, I come in, meet up with that dude on the sidewalk. The same dude that was just trying to stab me on Friday. I'm walking around. I'm just, I just hit the east side. That's usually what I would do when I would come in the morning because that was like the worst side and it had the buildings with the gangbangers in it and all that. So I go over there and I meet up with him on the sidewalk. And,
Hmm.
we kind of had a little bit of an altercation, kind of, but when we didn't touch or nothing like that. He just was talking some crap and I was just standing my ground or whatever. But he went in and walked off. So that ticked me off so bad, man. I went up there to the admin office. I was giving them hell and stuff. I was just talking, like, man, what are y'all doing? Like, y'all running this place so insecurely that somebody's gonna get
Hmm.
hurt, man. And it might be me messing around doing stuff like this because, like I say, I didn't know that. In my mind, that dude was not on the compound. 2 days after this just happened, he's in the hole. But anyway, I went out on leave after that. After that day, I went on leave for 3 weeks. When I come back, they're telling me, "Oh, two of our staff are out right now. They got hurt during a cell extraction." I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" They telling me what happened. Oh, that same dude with the pipe. So now they just ended up not even getting this pipe from this guy, and this is a pipe that we knew that he had. They ended up not getting it from him, and he had a roommate too. So he was in there sexually assaulting the roommate for like weeks before anybody figured it out. And
Mm,
then that's when they finally did a cell extraction. And they did a cell extraction with two females and two males. They better be lucky that they didn't nobody get hurt worse than what they did, because that was another thing. Like, you probably remember that guy. He was at Valdosta. That's why I knew him when I first came up. And I told the warden, like, hey, you better call some tax squad, because I already knew that I couldn't go up in there by myself. I mean, I probably could if like I had to, like there's something going on and I'm just gonna run off in there. But like, I knew this guy to be very violent and like very physically capable. So like I wasn't like I was volunteering saying, yeah, let me just go up in there by myself and try to get him. Because like this guy, I seen this fight happen too at Valdosta. He got the top part of his ear bit off at Valdosta when he got in the fight out there.
what was
But
his name? His last name?
dang man, it was a B. It started with a B, but I'm blanking on it, man. I might it might come to me later. I know it started
Billings.
with a B. He was a GD guy, but he was like old. I think he was like BGD or something like that. But he got in a fight out there on the small yard of C&D, and there was these dudes trying to jump him, and they ended up because he was biting them. It was a big fight, and they ended up biting the top part of one of his ears off, and that's kind of how I recognized him at Johnson. I was like, oh, okay, this is that guy
Hmm.
from Valdosta. But and he was mental health level 3. Dang, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, man. But anyway, ain't no sense getting hung up on it. But yeah, so situations like that where, like I'm just saying, like, man, this is so bad out here that things that are preventable are happening. Because like that was preventable. The sexual assault stuff for whatever 2 more weeks after we found out about the pipe. Like that guy should have had the pipe taken from him that day, and then that would have given a separation between him and the roommate, and then the roommate could have went ahead and got out of that situation then. But that ain't the way it happened, just because, like I say, you don't even have the people here to even operate one building, really, much
that
less a
that
whole prison.
that's the scary thing, is when you don't have enough people to even deal with the problem situation. Because even when we had dwindling staffing numbers, like if you really, if an inmate really wanted to smoke, we can get some people together and come deal with you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Usually, but it's a scary thing when you don't have anybody. And to shed light on what you were saying, like, not to defend what they're doing. I'm not going to defend what they did, but I bet you that they let him out of seg because they couldn't get nobody else to come out, because everybody was scared to come out. Everybody was down there
100%.
that put themselves on the door because they didn't want to live in a certain dorm or whatever. And when your population's gridlocked, when you have to do one for one, basically, he was probably the only one that was willing to get out. Like, yeah, hell yeah, let me out the hole.
Yeah,
That's probably what
exactly.
he was.
Yep.
They probably said, "Who want to get out?" And we need a bed. He's probably the only one that said, "I'll
Hey.
get, I'll get out." I got my stuff.
Yeah.
I got my stuff packed up already.
Yeah, I ain't even unpacked it yet.
Yeah,
Shit.
but so are you from? I'm there's a concept in business. It's called planned obsolescence. Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
I'm I'm more I'm more convinced, as time goes on, that there's something deeply rooted in GDC's intentions, that I think it has something to do with planned obsolescence. Like one of the comments, she said something that is a theory of mine. That I think maybe there's some kind of monetary goal for it. Maybe putting the people in the positions that they are. Maybe some deeper goal, some deeper mission of maybe, well, maybe we'll leave all these positions open and somehow we're able to pocket some of the extra money left over. Or it could be something even more evil, like maybe some kind of like pseudo genocide, where we say, hey, let's lock up a lot of the poverty and criminal population and just let them kill each other. And they'll wipe themselves out, you know without even realizing they're doing it. Like, we'll reduce our population by doing that. That may be something that they're doing. Like, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put it past them. Like the longer that I've worked in corrections and now between a few agencies, something that I underrated is the importance of being ethical,
Yeah.
and having people in positions where they affect things on a big level. Those people need to be ethical human beings. And if they're not, their actions will follow suit of what they believe and how they think they should conduct themselves. Like if you have an ethical person, like no matter what you do to try to shake their integrity, it's not going to work. Like they're going to do the right thing. They're going to try to go towards the right decision no matter what. My dad, he used to say there's no right way to do a wrong thing. And I think GDC, like you have all these different leaders in the agency that are unethical, that have all this apathy towards fixing these critical issues. And I think that's the actual core of their problem, is that the people leading the agency are unethical and also incompetent. Like we kind of touched on off camera, like they have people leading the agency that aren't suited to do the job. They're ill prepared to properly advise the people at those levels of leadership like what they should do. You need somebody with enough experience and knowledge to be able to make good decisions, make good sound judgment. And a lot of these people in these executive positions, your assistant commissioners, your regional directors, a lot of them have a heavy background in counseling or education, or one of the positions in the department that requires a fancy degree and not necessarily like working the units and working um restrictive housing and like cutting their teeth, doing the stuff like me and you and like some of the guys we were talking about earlier, like some of your some of your best wardens that come from security, work their way through the security ranks. Those guys never made it up to the level that they should have. There was one or two here and there that got really high. People like Mr. Benjamin Ford. He got pretty high up there. He might still be in the agency. Jermaine White, he's got a little bit, but then those people, like they're 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 unethical. So it doesn't matter they have the experience. Like they've been corrupted by the apathy and the general feeling of how management wants to do business. And then you and I both know there's a strong culture of fraternization and wardens and people in management in general, like a lot of males that are in charge. You don't have as many women that are wardens and directors. You have some. I'm not saying you don't have some, but it's almost like they get in those positions to just so they can abuse their power and fraternize with the officers and the nurses and that's a strong culture there of fraternization. and um
100%.
and I just think with the agency, man, like they're picking the wrong people to run their their institutions. They're picking the wrong people to run their regions. They're picking the wrong people to run the agency. I mean, I worked Florida Department of Corrections, and he just retired, but the secretary over their agency for years, and the one that was the secretary when I was there, Ricky Dixon, he came up through the ranks, man. Like he nothing short of grinded his way to the top. He was a officer, a sergeant, lieutenant, all the whole works. And he's the guy leading their agency, and you see by the way that he delivers these Senate hearings and these different messages, and the way that he's trying to run the culture there in Florida. You can tell he really cares. Like he doesn't just say he cares; he actually cares, and he knows what he's doing. And that's
Yep.
why like Florida Department of Corrections, like the people that work there, that worked there back in the day, like they have their gripes and complaints about the problems that they have, and how it's not how it used to be, and so forth. But comparing it to Georgia, I mean, it's not even a competition. Like I said this in like another interview that I did with Christian, that like comparing them to Georgia, I mean, it's like comparing the LA Dodgers to a T-ball team, man. I mean, is that stark of a difference? I mean, their version of short when I was at the institution I was at was like when they were short, they would have like 19, 20 people. And that was like really short for them. But they would have somebody in every dorm. They would have, four or five people on the yard, so to speak, which is like, you would have the shift OIC, but then you would have, people that were sergeants that, weren't confined to a post. They were just walking around.
Oh
So
yeah.
you would have two or three people in confinement, and then you would have one in the perimeter vehicle, one in the front entry area. At 24/7, they had somebody in the front entry area. There was never like, oh, front entry, you're going to drive the perimeter vehicle too. Like there was none of that. They had a perimeter vehicle, somebody in the front entry, they had somebody in main control, officer in every single unit. Um, like I said, at least three or four people on the yard. The shortest I ever seen was like where they had like two people on the yard. But then, the captain never had to run chow. Like their captain in Florida is just like what the lieutenant is in Georgia.
Okay.
The captain, I've seen them run chow before, but like that's not a thing they do. Like the shift OIC doesn't run chow there. In Georgia, obviously they do. I mean, so their version of short and the problems they face are you could tell they really held the line. You know what I'm saying? They really did what it took to maintain certain staffing levels and not let the bottom fall out of it. They never let it bottom out. And even when I think, from what I understand, years before Ricky Dixon became the secretary, and this was a real proof of concept that, you get the right management, you could turn things around. They had I think a secretary by the name of Julie Black. I want to say her name was Julie. I can't remember what her name was, but um, no, Black wasn't her last name. It was something else. But they had a secretary for a while that a lot of the FDC staff they claimed she didn't know what she was doing. She came from somewhere else, and she really wrecked that department. From what I understand, they really got really low as far as staffing levels, lower than what they were when I got there, um, and they really. To their standard bottomed out, but then they bring in a new secretary and Ricky Dixon, and they make some changes, they bump some salaries up, and do some things, and like they turned it around. So like to me it's almost like unfathomable that like GDC could turn it around, but realistically I got to remind myself they could if they just got the right people in there, and if they got support from legislation and the governor. And that's another thing, like Bryant Kemp, he's done a poor job. Like it is what it is. Like I would have voted for, I didn't vote for the gubernatorial election, but I would have voted for him over Stacey Abrams. But he's done a poor job. He
Understand.
ha- he hasn't done his job in properly supervising and correcting the problems in the biggest law enforcement agency in Georgia. And Georgia, I believe, is like fourth in the nation with incarcerated individuals per cap. Actually, number one in per capita, I believe,
Yeah, but yeah.
and fourth in the nation in total prison population. Georgia's nowhere close to being the biggest state as far as population. I mean, you're talking about California, Texas, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania. I think was
Colorado. I mean,
I,
there's a lot of states that have a higher population than Georgia.
yeah,
I mean,
Florida. And I remember when I spoke to Mr. Ford when I was leaving. He was asking me about why am I leaving, and I told him I'm going to Florida. Well, he asked me what I was doing after I left there, and I told him I was going to Florida Department of Corrections, and he basically gave me like the grass is not always greener on the other side kind of speech, and I was like, well, I hear you, but like from what I understand, I'm talking to some friends, it's a lot better over there, and I do love corrections. You know, I haven't lost my love for corrections, but Mr. Ford, like the things you guys think of this agency and what y'all are trying to do, I just don't agree with. And I've got to go somewhere where I think these people will agree with me a little more. And he tried to use the excuse of, well, even if Florida is a little better, like they're a bigger state and they have more a bigger budget to work with. And I'm like, well, first off, you're going to tell me that we don't have the budget to do it when we have The entire city of Atlanta. Tell me the taxable income in the city of Atlanta. And last time I checked, we have state tax. They don't. So what's the excuse here? And last time I
We
checked,
have a lot of we have a lot in Georgia. That's something we do have. We do have a lot of industry, and definitely, like I say, inside the city of Atlanta. Man, whoa, you're talking about a lot of revenue that goes through that place every day. And not only
yeah,
that, like our allotted budget. I haven't compared the budget of GDC to Florida's, but I doubt Florida gets very much in their corrections budget more than Georgia, because Georgia is like they're topping the record every year. Every time they renew their budget,
mm,
at least in the last several years, they've been topping it. Like there's never been this much to the
it.
Georgia Department of Corrections. You know,
I imagine Florida does have a notable amount more than Georgia does, but it's not unproportional disproportional with the population that they have and the resources they need to be able to run that agency. I mean, Florida's bigger, they have more people, so it's not disproportionate. Georgia has enough money to work with to do what they need to do. In my opinion, I think it's more of a culture thing, and I think it's
yes,
more of a because you could sell me the point of, all right, between our, I'm just going to throw out a number, between our 31 major institutions in Georgia, we've got a combined, you know 100 vacancies per prison. I'll just throw out a number. Well, let's and I'm not a budget analyst, but this is just my thoughts on it. Like, okay, well, let's acknowledge we won't fill those 100, but let's seek to try to fill in the next year. Let's try to fill 30 per facility. And in order to do that, because we're going to acknowledge we're not going to fill all 100 of them, let's use some of that leftover money and allocate it towards hiring bonuses, towards sign-on bonuses, things like that. Let's do something, and you could sell me the point of, like, you know, well, we'll have to figure out that problem later if we do somehow fill those vacancies, and we need more money to be able to hire more people. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of leftover money that you guys aren't using for anything, and that's what bothers me. And you guys are doing nothing.
yeah.
It, it,
As
it's
this
it
thing has gotten so far out of control, like
it's crazy for me to fathom. I mean, you could go on USA Jobs right now and look at the Department of Justice. I mean, they're offering like $30,000 sign-on bonuses for people to come to the Bureau of Prisons just to be a CO. And now you have to agree to work for like a few years, from what I understand. But um, they're doing something. Like the certain level of urgency is there. There's no urgency, in
100%.
in that agency. It's like, it's almost like once was a proud agency. I almost think of it as like what was once like a proud college football program, and you're going 4-8 every year, 3-9 every year, and you don't fire the head coach, you don't make staffing changes, you don't dedicate more money to the program or anything. You just continue to do what you're doing and think that it's going to fix itself. It's not. It's only going to get worse. Instead
That's
of,
what
like,
I feel.
I could kind of get behind Georgia, and I probably wouldn't have left at the time if if they were, doing something, like if they were doing something that I felt was like adequate to try, at least try. Like, it's one thing if it doesn't work. If you swing and you miss, then that's fine. But you can't just do nothing, because at that point it's, like that document detailed, it's deliberate indifference. I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
it's past negligence. It's deliberate indifference. Like, you guys are doing this, it's got to be on purpose.
Yeah, because you're talking about 6 years at dang near all the prisons. Because, like you say, 2020, 2021, it was going down statewide. You're talking about before that about at Telfair, because, like I say, 2019, it was already like that at Telfair. So you're just talking
Hmm.
about an extreme amount of time. And
Hmm.
there are a few staff members that have been working through that entire time, that have been on boots on
Hmm.
the ground. There's not that many left now, but man, they those people been through some stuff, and definitely the inmate population for sure, like I say, as well, has been through some stuff. So this whole situation, that's what made me decide that, like, kind of like what you're saying, like, man, I can't be with this. Like, I can't do it. Like, even though I'm
Hmm.
accomplished and all this, and like I'm fine. I was kind of like you, like there was no kind of nobody after me or nothing. I was in good favor with everybody, but it's like, man, at a certain point, like you were just saying, somebody's got to do something other than just
Hmm.
sit here and watch this keep sinking. And we're watching all these people suffer. You know, all like I say, the staff and the inmates. Like nobody does good when you're running compounds like they're being ran in Georgia now. And
Yeah, and yeah, and honestly, like I don't want to dismiss what the effect that it has on the staff, and the quality of life and performance and their personal. I'm not going to dismiss that, but what I will say is I think the real group that's suffering from that that's going on in Georgia is the inmate population and society, because we're supposed to be incarcerating these people, most of them a limited amount of time. Most of them aren't lifers. So most of them are supposed to be going back into society. And, you're never going to, you're never going to hear me, crying for advocating for, inmates. So like prison is harsh, in general. You're never going to hear me say anything like that, because when prisons run the way it's supposed to be, like, you not getting to see your family as often as you like, or having to walk when we tell you to walk, or eat when we tell you to. I'll never feel sorry for the inmate population for that, because that's just prison. You want to be free, don't commit the crime. But at the end of the day, these inmates are being subjected to things that the system was not designed for. And I know some people, I even saw people in the comments of the video I did with Christian, like, oh, well, you don't want to deal with, you know, being assaulted by gangbangers. You don't want to be deal with, being extorted by gang members. Don't go to prison. And now there's maybe there's some truth to that, because some of that stuff still goes on even when you have proper staffing. But think about the carryover effect it has in society. You're bringing guys into a prison with all these different people they may or may not know. Most of them they don't know, and you're telling them what they did was wrong, and you want them to change. But you bring them in there, and if they're not a gang member, they've almost certainly got to carry a knife. They almost certainly got to prepare to, be robbed, or, a dude, come trying to rape them, or they've got to prepare for that kind of stuff. So they have to be wolves in order to just survive in there. When we don't want them to be wolves, we want to, try to enforce, positively reinforce the idea that we want you to change. So when you get out, you don't do the same thing.
100%.
But you're actually enforcing the idea they need to be like that to survive. And that's, I
Yeah.
think, the big picture, you know, chief violation that the agency has, is they're endorsing the idea that guys have to be like that. So the punishment, cause and effect, mental gymnastics that an inmate must face of, well, I committed this crime, so now I got to come to prison. They're almost not going to be able to fully accept that the way that they're supposed to accept that, hey, I did wrong, but I can change. Because unless they go to one of these prisons that, these faith-based prisons, or prisons that are an outlier in the agency, if they're going to like a real prison, they're probably going to do some hard time where they have to stay on edge just to survive. You're forcing them to be you're forcing them to be that way. You're enabling them to be who they are when they came in there. And that's the real problem that I have, is that, like I said, I'm not dismissing what the staff go through, but at the end of the day, for the most part, staff members can, do what they can do, and at the end of the day, we get to go home. Those inmates, and it's not from a sense of sympathy, like, oh, I feel sorry for the inmates on the basis of, like, some of them may or may not deserve that. That's not for me to decide. It's more like, what kind of idea are we enforcing? What kind of message are we sending? Because
Well, it's empathy. It's more empathy than it is sympathy. Like, It's
Yeah.
okay to feel empathetic to the conditions that another human is in, like because it is wrong. And like I say, and a lot of these guys are not even making it. Like you say, it's one thing to turn this guy back out into society after he's done now been in a war zone continuously for years on end. So now he not only has PTSD, he's got chronic PTSD. He's done been
Hmm.
repeatedly. I'm talking about this guy might have been in 50 standoffs in the last 4 years. So you got that situation that happens,
Hmm.
which is not good for society as a whole. But also you got the other situation that happens where this guy's got 3 months left and boom, he's dead. This guy's got a year left,
Hmm.
and he's been there tied up for 4 days, getting his ribs broken and his fingers broken and all this, and his eye sockets broken and sexually assaulted, and the list goes on. It's like, man, that is not part. That's not what this is supposed to be. Like you're saying, this is not
Nah.
what this thing's designed to be. That's not what it should be. That is cruel and unusual.
Yeah.
I agree with you with the DO and the DOJ. I'm like you. That was a very good report. I didn't read every page of it. I kind of like skimmed through and read the high points, but I need to go read the whole thing. But I mean, it's true though. I mean, because like I say, I've seen stuff like this with my own two eyes, and it is wrong, and they are. I agree with you. They are the ones that are suffering the most behind this situation.
GED, even if you took all of that out, at the end of the day, the primitive goal that we're seeking to protect the public and keep these people incarcerated, um, while they serve the time that they were, um, that the judge handed them to serve, and in that process, and in theory, in a highly controlled environment where their living environment is being searched and they're being made to clean up after themselves and be accountable for their action. That's the way the prison was designed. Like I said, even if you took all of that stuff away, even if you went to like corrections in 1991, at the very core of how it's supposed to be run, it's supposed to be a primarily security based operation where they're being made to follow rules, and they're and structure is upheld, good order is enforced, and you're not even scratching the surface of what is supposed to be done in these prisons these days. I mean, you're not even close. When I left Georgia and went to Florida, like, I had to up my game. I had to step my game up because a lot of the Florida officers in the prison, the institution I was at, like, they were jam up, man. They made inmates follow the rules, do what they were supposed to do, and I had to remind myself. I almost had like trauma. Um, the way that I viewed things, I was almost conditioning my mind to let a lot of stuff go, because in Georgia, you don't have the means, the manpower to enforce that stuff. So if I can't enforce it, I'm gonna have to arbitrarily decide, what I am and aren't going to enforce. And I had to break myself of that. Like, no, here we do make inmates follow all the rules, and we do conduct frequent searches. We do pat inmates down and make them walk in a straight line all the time. We do escort inmates. And I don't think it was a Georgia thing; it was more of a Florida thing. But like, man, when it's nighttime, like, inmates don't go anywhere without an escort in Florida. And I thought that was a good practice.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but I had to, even as a former, assistant warden, man, like, I had to up my game. I had to, you know, not I won't say re-remember, but almost get back into the program of like, okay, we're making inmates do what we're supposed to do here. And if I have a problem with an inmate and I need to call somebody, they're coming. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're coming immediately, and that inmate's going to be dealt with. And if he wants to give us problems, we'll solve those problems, and we got plenty of people to do it. In Florida, they have male officers everywhere, and the problem and people will say, well, what do you say that you're being sexist? Like when you're talking about a male institution, you need a heavy male workforce. You can't do it
100%.
with 75% of the shift being females. And more so when that
Don't even
shift is
want to
only
do it with 50% of the shift being
no,
female.
no, not at
Because
a
like
male
you just said,
institution.
100% of the inmates in here are male.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different when you work at a female institution. So like
Oh, yeah.
I work at a female institution now, and as a male officer, you really rely on those females, to lay down the law, to
Mhm.
do what we did in the way we defended female officers. That's the way that they do with us there. They don't let inmates walk around and in their underwear in the housing unit. They don't let inmates try to flirt with us or say inappropriate things. Like they lay down the law, man. They don't play. So I don't say that to disparage women working in the corrections workforce. I say that because it's an inadequate level when you have too many female staff uh, comprising your shift at a male institution, because there's a lot of things that you need male officers for. Not just the visual body searches, not just the pat searches where it's not practical to have a female doing any of that. It's borderline, you know, cruel and unusual to make inmates, subject inmates to that.
Yep.
But also you need male officers to form a team up. I mean, like you said, when I was a deputy warden, when I was a captain and deputy warden, bro, I had to get involved in situations. I had to put hands on inmates at times because I saw a situation going left and somebody was going to get hurt. And yeah, I may be a captain or I may be deputy warden, but especially when I was deputy warden, like, damn, bro, you're wearing, nice clothes and like, ideally you want to, sit back and watch and observe and, supervise and
Right.
develop. You don't want to have to get involved with shit like that. But I had to because you didn't have enough males there.
Yep.
And if I didn't get involved in some of those situations, man, who knows how it would have gone. Like when I was at Altry, I was a captain and me and the deputy warden of security were on the team, both of us. I mean, that's sad. That's crazy if you think about it.
Yeah. It's that's what's crazy too is that even if you just backpedal 5 years at every facility in the state, and you would have told those staff that were working there that hey, in 5 years from now, there's not even going to be but two males at this prison, and one's going to be the deputy warden, and one's going to be the captain. They'd have been
Hmm.
like, "What? No, you're
Yep.
lying." But that's
Yeah.
really how that's really how it's got. You know.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I can point to a variety of things, but it's hard to fathom what has happened to that agency. Like it really is. And like I say, you look at some of these other agencies that I've worked for, and they have their own problems. Like I'm not saying they're perfect or really even close to it, but it's just like the level of problems that GDC's. How did it get that bad and nobody did anything about it? Like it just it's hard to believe, man.
Yeah, because the time to fix it was years ago by doing like what you're saying Florida
Absolutely.
did, by putting the right people in positions where they can implement things to change the direction of the ship. That was needed, like I say, 2016, 2017,
Yeah.
18, right in there. That was the time for intervention, you know.
Yeah. And
I'm kind of
another
like you
thing.
now. When I try to think of something now, it's like, oh man, you still need that with changing of the leadership and all that. But now, like I say, you about need to mass hiring event to at least get them, a bare minimum there to be able to secure the dang place, man.
You got to throw out the baby with the bathwater in the
Yeah.
situation George is in. I mean, you gotta strip it down to the nuts and bolts, man. I mean, you have to fire everybody. You have to get a new board of corrections. You have to completely rebudget your system. What's needed in Georgia. I don't know if they have the means to be able to fix it at this point. Well, I mean, they do, but it'll take a period of years. It'll take years and a lot of hard work, a lot of effort. I don't think they're willing to dedicate that. I mean, like I said, like I think they're just going to have to completely rebrand that agency, and I hope they do. Like I don't wish ill will upon that agency or anything. Like I'm just calling out the BS.
Yeah.
Because I'm a good man and and a man of character. Like I'm not gonna. That's why I left the position that I did. I was on track to probably be a warden in a few years, and maybe higher than that, and that would come with its you fair share of benefits and pay and whatnot. And I think they've got to figure out a way to not only just get more people in the door, but they've got to figure out a way to, well, it'd be hard to figure out a way now, but they should have figured out a way years ago to not to retain the veteran officers, because they ran a lot of them off. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of those sins that they committed were really actually in the early 2000s, like 2010s, like even earlier than what you were saying. My dad was telling me, like, when they changed the pension to what it is now, when they went 10 years without giving people a raise, that those were some pretty hard mistakes to come back from. You lost a lot of people, even if they didn't leave immediately. Around 2000, I think that's why the timeline you said, that's what, they started leaving around 2014, 15, 16, because it was time for them to retire, or they decided it wasn't worth it anymore. But at the end of the day, I think those mistakes were made in the early 2000s. But I mean, some of the same stuff has been going on for decades. Even some of those past commissioners, like we were just saying, they were appointed positions. Like they didn't come from the agency, and that's just a an egregious mistake on GDC's part by making that a political office instead of making it a merit position that somebody, if they work hard enough, could earn their way into that spot. Like that should be a position where somebody like me, if when I was at the agency, like I could be able to hope to get if I work hard enough. But realistically, you're not going to get that position, because even some of the ones that do come from the agency, like why is Ahmed Holt? Why is he not one of the next in line for that? And I'm not saying he would be the right man. I mean, I don't think he's a very ethical individual, but I'm just saying he spent his whole career in the agency. Like, why is
Hmm.
he not your next selection? But instead, you pull this guy in he's a fucking outsider. He doesn't even work for the agency. He knows nothing about them.
Yeah.
Like
It
we were
has
saying
been
earlier,
work.
why
You
like
know.
why like we were saying earlier, why would I bring in the CEO of JP Morgan and Chase to run Taco Bell? That doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, this guy might have leadership and management experience, but what does he know about this particular trade? He doesn't know that, I don't know if have you ever seen that movie Moneyball?
No. Uh,
Well, long story short, one of the scouts, the GM Billy Bean, he brings in this stats guy, this analytics guy that doesn't know the game of baseball like that, but he knows numbers and projections and all these different things. And after getting tired of losing for years in the playoffs, he brings in this guy and he just drastically switches up the approach. Instead of, for years we've leaned on scouting and guys that know what makes good baseball players and what to look for. And the A's, even during that time, were really good at scouting. They brought in really good players that succeeded at the highest level. And the scout gets in an argument with the GM and he tells him, they're not baseball people, Billy. They don't know what we know. They don't know what you and I know, what makes a good ball player. And 30 years of watching the game, it's almost disrespectful to think that this guy could come in and do what I do. And so you've watered down and pissed on what I do for a living by saying I'm going to bring in somebody else that doesn't have nearly the experience that you do. and I'm going to bring somebody else in to do it. It makes no fucking sense, man.
You know,
It makes no sense.
like I say, many areas of this whole debacle don't make any sense, man. Unless you start, like you were saying earlier, you start looking at it from a perspective of, okay, maybe at the high levels, like not on these levels where these people are just being put in these positions that are incompetent to be able to handle the task that's at hand, but people that are above that, maybe they just are wanting this to completely crash and burn, and for these people to, like I say, kill each other in there. And that's what they're
I,
doing. And there are hundreds and hundreds dying, and there are, like I say, thousands more that are being subjected to some things that change them. You know, you were saying how it
mm-hmm,
changes you as a person working in there, and it does. I'm I'm definitely not the same person that I was before 10 years of working in corrections, but I think that's mitigated to somewhat depending on your personality. Like some people,
mm-hmm,
like you were saying earlier, like some people just are more able to go with that than others, and that's fine. Like you just need to be able to find those people and get them utilized correctly. But
mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
this stuff now is just completely it's it's all wrong, man. It's all wrong.
oh, hold on one second, bud. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
about to go and get off pretty soon anyway because I'm getting down. I got about. I mean, I could probably go for another 10 minutes or so. But
yeah, yeah, same.
what
Yeah,
were you gonna say?
yeah, but I've got to believe though. I couldn't figure it out for years, but I've got to believe there's got to be some deeper underlying mission, some deeper underlying goal for what they're trying to do. There's no way that this stuff has been going on as long as it has, and been unchecked, and nothing done about it. Because were the same situation to be happening in Florida, I mean, there would be there would be drastic action being taken right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it wouldn't have even got to that level first off, but if it was, there would be drastic. I mean, one thing I didn't add in is like in Florida, they have the National Guard working in their prisons. And it was a bold move, to say the least, because like there's a lot of things that come with that. You got to, kind of cross train them, and you can usually only put them in certain areas of the institution. But in Florida, I mean, they did that. They put them in their perimeter vehicles. They put them in their control rooms. They taught them the, basics of what they're supposed to be doing, and they just utilized that resource that they had, and they needed it, because it helped keep them afloat. And why are they not exploring some kind of option like that in Georgia?
I know. And that's what I was
Uh,
thinking, like I say, years ago. It's like, man, dude, y'all needed to do this. Like they still do now. Like, I made no mistake, but man, this was justifiable in 2020. Like I said, when we're having these situations like they're going on at Ware. And that situation at Ware, those guys, some of those same guys that did that at Ware ended up badly assaulting an officer at Telfair. I'm talking about almost had him hostage. They was going to take him hostage too, and the only thing that stopped them was that they was lucky that there was a lieutenant and a night shift unit manager that were there that night that were veteran from Telfair. And I know both of them, and if they see this later, they'll know who I'm talking about. But like they ran up in there spraying these guys and fought for that officer and got him back, essentially. Like, so, and stuff like that just happening over and over and over, and you're still not going to do anything. Like, we're out here with the dang lockdown units abandoned, which is how that happened. Like, these guys that did that at Ware, they were on tier program at Telfair, and the building abandoned at night, and they pop out the cell, and they was just sitting there waiting on him when he came back. Came back in the room, and it's like there's no officer up here in the booth. Like, if there would have been an officer in the booth, none of that could have ever happened. Like, the officer would have
Hmm.
seen the inmate coming out. Hey, hey, inmate popping out the cell down here in lockdown. But
Hmm.
to just leave it
Yeah.
like that for this long, and you got all these people, both like I say, staff and inmate, like hundreds and thousands of inmates and dozens of staff that have suffered behind this unjustly,
Hmm. Yeah.
and
And well,
still not even saying, "Hey, let's use the resources that we have at our fingertips." Which the Georgia National Guard is at the fingertips of the governor of Georgia. Like, make no mistake,
yeah.
like he can activate them, and and yeah, you do have to train them, but man, the BCOT ain't but 6 weeks, 240 hours. Like,
Hmm.
and the National Guardsmen are already in a military. They've been trained. They know how to march and a lot of other stuff that you would have to teach at BCOT that they already
Well,
know anyway.
I mean, even without teaching them some of those things, like it to me, those might be barriers to why you would or wouldn't do it, but they're only barriers if you don't want it bad enough. Like if you think
Yeah,
the urgency, if the need, if the necessity is there to have to employ that means, then you'll do it. You know what I'm saying? Like whether you agree with it or not, or anybody agrees with it, like Donald Trump was sending the National Guard to DC to help the police force, and that's very unorthodox. Like, that's very there's a variety of problems that can come with that, and a lot of different slippery slope philosophies that you can take from that, and maybe more unintentional consequences behind that as well. But like at the end of the day, if you think that's what's needed and that's the only resource that you have, then you do that. Desperate times come for, desperate measures call for desperate actions.
yeah,
So like I was saying before, just do something.
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
you you can't tell me you don't have the money, because if you have enough money to have 170 vacancies at Valdosta, then well, why not just break off some crazy sign-on bonuses until you can at least fill 30 or 40 of those? Because you're not going to convince me overtime takes up all of that. Because number one, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to give away different agencies, practices necessarily, but like I know for a fact there are two other agencies, one of them especially, that spends way more money in overtime than Georgia ever does, because they pay real overtime. Like they pay time and a half, not just, oh, you have to accrue over this a certain amount and then we'll pay it out. No, they're paying time and a half every pay period. They're paying premiums just for you working different, like night shift, like between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. This one agency, they pay you extra for that. They pay you extra for working on Sundays. They pay you extra for working holidays. So I mean, they're officers are nickel and diming them, at the highest extent, but yet they still have the money for things, because like at the end of the day, 170 vacancies means 170 salaries, 170 benefits packages, 170 Social Security employer deductions, because the employer pays a big portion of that, the FICA obligation that you have to pay. I can't remember what portion it is. I think the employer pays half and you pay half. But what you see come out of your paycheck, your employer, if you're a W-2 employee, your employer pays half of that. So there's a lot of money that is allocated for those 170 vacancies that you guys are just not using. And
100%.
with all the other crooked shit y'all are doing, you're telling me somebody couldn't just, switch some numbers around, cook the books a little bit to take, well, we know we're not going to hire all 170. Let's aim to get, in a 2-year period, let's aim to get 50 of them hired. And the money that, just say we're spending enough overtime of 20 vacancies were. Well, that's still like 90, that's still like 100 vacancies worth of money. Like you guys could cook the books a little bit to they use that money for, bonuses and, things to, maybe you got to quote unquote flood the market, like you said, mass hiring event, bring a crap ton of people in at one time. And maybe if you do that in concurrently, simultaneously, like change your culture around and like hire some new people, maybe you could fix it. Like I actually could see that working,
And something that
you
I've
know.
said too is call up all these people, like you're saying, the ones that already were post certified that have left during these past just say 10 years. I mean, to give a good number out there, but all of them need calling. If they left on good terms and they just resigned or whatever, because like I said, that is what most of the people that, like you say, are quote unquote good people that just want to, that maybe or have a passion for this, but that just didn't agree with how things were going, and they shouldn't have agreed with how things are going. Look where it's led us now. Like I say,
Hmm.
we're that's what baffles me too about the whole thing is that they still haven't done anything, and yet we're literally making history down here. Like, can't even. Is it still on?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, you're good. Like, Google won't even admit to the real seriousness of what's going on in Georgia because Google doesn't know. Like, if you Google, and I've done that, I even took a little screenshot of it and posted it a few weeks ago. But I just Google searched has a prison with 16 dormitories housing over 1,200 inmates, like, and I think I even put it in there, like such as Telfair State Prison in Georgia, ever been abandoned with only 3 female officers on the compound for an entire shift? Has that ever happened? If you ask Google that, it'll tell you no. That's a rumor. They ain't no. That's never happened in the history of ever. Oh, there was some things in Katrina that happened where a couple buildings got abandoned. Like, it'll take you off on a thing, and then it'll say, "Well, there's some basis for this rumor. That they do have a staffing crisis and so forth." And then they'll start throwing out the official numbers, and like you
Yeah.
were pointing out in another conversation that you had, like those official numbers are skewed with people that are employed at PDCs and stuff like that. And not only that, it's also skewed with people because, like I say, the IRTs and stuff like that, and even a lot of
Hmm.
your maintenance, also a lot of positions, and even with the security that go around with the maintenance that travels all over the state, like all those officers are assigned to a prison, just like the
Hmm.
the IRT. Those officers are all assigned. I mean, it's depending on the region which
Yeah.
facility it is, but they're assigned, so all those numbers are going in that too. So
Hmm.
when you really look at the totality of what's going on, like we really are seeing situations where 3 females or 2 females and a male are at Ware State Prison or Valdosta State Prison or whatever. I mean, even to the point, like I say, of leaving it where there is no male even there, period. And
Hmm.
this is not at freaking Montgomery State Prison, man. This is not at one of these little small camps. You're talking about like you were saying earlier, the close security inmates, the ones that need it 24/7 are the ones that are just getting completely abandoned.
Hmm.
And like I said, they won't even admit to it. So, but as far as getting people to help, like just telling the truth about the situation that they're in would help a lot. I feel like anyway. I mean,
That's the first
if
step.
they came and say, "Hey, look, we have totally wet the bed. We are. This is completely out of control. We need people in here right now. We're going to do these siren bonuses. We're going to do whatever, and we need help." Like if they would just say that and like I say, get the ball rolling on doing something because like I say, you can't allow this, which I mean I guess they can. I was thinking and I thought you left in late 2024, but it was actually 2023 that you
Yeah.
left.
It was December of 2023. So like I started in
Okay.
Florida actually in December of 2023.
Okay, good
It
deal.
was
Yeah, so
it
you
was
actually left before I did.
hmm
So we're seeing the same things and they're just like, man, we can't allow that. But like I say, they have, much to my chagrin, much to my surprisement, they have allowed it to this point. And there's a lot coming down the pipeline. I mean, I'm definitely working on a lot. I have over this last month or so, I've got into contact with a lot more people than what I initially, you know, started with. So, I mean, that's good, and I'm just gonna continue trying to do get the conversation going, and that's where a conversation with people like you know, helps out a lot because you know the issue, you know. And so I like to say I appreciate you for coming on. And I know earlier you were saying that uh that you how you started at Valdosta and you went up through ranks and it ain't like you were just some person that wasn't doing right. And I'll just say that when I got to Valdosta, like it was very easy to pick you out as somebody that was gonna do very well in department. Like it doesn't surprise me at all, man, that you made it up to deputy warden in that before you left. And um, it's really sad that people like you are not doing what you could be doing, which is helping fix this, you know, and instead just got forced out essentially because of the the ethics, you know, like you say, of this whole situation. So yeah, man. It was at least as far as me anyway, and I'm not no kind of expert. And I was very young at that point too. I mean, I had just turned 21 when I got down to Valdosta, so it ain't like I'm the expert judge of character, but uh, but I've been on the prison compounds for quite some time, and man, like it's rare that you see somebody that's got a knack for corrections that has a good rapport with the inmates and the officers, and that is well respected by both of those categories. You know, it's like 1% of people that fit that bill. You know, and at least in my eyes, what I've seen of you, you know, you fit that bill. So, but you already know that, brother. But uh, I just thought I'd give you that compliment because, like, that's just the truth. Like,
I appreciate it, man. That means a lot. I thought a lot of you as well. So yeah, it's sad that they don't want good people. That they don't want good people to continue being employed with their agency. They want to run those kind of people off. And
you know,
it's
cause too
sad.
many problems. We won't sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, won't sell your soul. So you got to get
Yeah,
out. I honestly
yeah,
felt like if I continued the position that I was in, like I probably would have gotten fired or something because I would have gotten jammed up in something that really wasn't my fault. Where they wanted me to blame somebody and throw somebody into the bus, and I just wouldn't do it. If it was an officer that didn't make a round in a housing unit of the three buildings they were assigned to supervise, I wasn't going to try to get that man's job. He's got a family to feed. At the end of the day, like if y'all want to, like I don't know if you ever heard that, that college football coach Mike Gundy, and some reporters were writing stories about one of his players, like an 18, 19-year-old kid, and he was like, "You guys are going to write something about a kid? Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40." you know, so it's just kind of like if you guys are going to get somebody, you're going to have to get me. And so I said, man, before any of that, I'm gonna hand you guys my 2 week notice. I actually gave them a month notice just to try to let
really.
them, yeah, just try to let them get some things together.
Yeah, especially with you being in management like that. That was good practice on your part, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
wow.
it was a last parting gift to like, hey, we had some good times, but it's time to go.
Yeah.
That
And it's sad, man. It's sad that, like I say, not only for somebody working in a career, but just for the whole situation, man. It's very sad.
really is, man. Really is. But I hope they
Hey
get their
man,
stuff.
I look forward to seeing some better days. Hopefully we can connect again and maybe we'll have some better news to share next time. But
Yeah, and hopefully we get some. Hopefully we get some more people that are willing to speak out on some of this stuff because it might sound cliche, but like there's strength in numbers, and it's going to take more people speaking out and getting their voice heard in order for somebody to do something. Because if they're not going to listen to if they're not going to listen to us when we're employed, maybe they'll listen to us when we're not employed. Maybe, if we get the right size microphone, then maybe they'll listen then. And that's the way I look at it. I know there's people, man, there's people with the Atlanta Journal Constitution that would, that would hear you out, that would be glad to talk to you. There's one lady I can tell you off air that, that if you were interested in talking to, she'll definitely take some of your time.
100%. Yeah, yeah, I need to because if he or she, whoever would, then that would be the first media company that besides Georgia Prisoners Speak. Now Georgia Prisoners Speak did and they did a story on you as well and included you and we already spoke on that. But aside from them, none of these media companies have even responded to anything that's been sent to them by me, which I haven't spent much time sending stuff to media companies and stuff like that because like I say, I already pretty much know that that's on lockdown to a certain degree with stuff like this. But I mean, the stuff is definitely true. Like the and like you're saying, it does help more and more people to come and verify. That way, it ain't just one crazy person over here saying the sky's falling, and everybody's like, is he really being serious? You know.
Yeah, some people are going to watch this video, and some people are going to watch this video and think that, oh, well, those are just two disgruntled employees, or they're making some things up, or they must have gotten in trouble, and now they've trying to strike back at the agency. When in reality, there's a whole lot of people that are corroborate some of the same things that we're saying, that
100%.
are just too apprehensive to speak out, and need some of those people to come forward. And some people will share this video and get this video out there, and maybe some more videos. And I definitely know, Atlanta Journal Constitution, if you're able to get into that medium, that's the loudest voice as far as media in Georgia, I think. Atlanta Journal Constitution, the most read newspaper publishing company in Georgia, and they love to blast the Department of Corrections, so they would definitely listen to what you got to say. But I'll get with you on
Yeah.
off air about that.
All right. Good deal, man. Well, hey, I sure appreciate it, and it was good talking to you, man. Hopefully, like I say, some the viewers can find some utility in this. And I mean, I agree with you, man. And that's something that every time I put a video out, I'm thinking like, I hope that some of these former and current COs, especially because I mean that's the realm that I know the most. But even the nurses and counselors and all that too. Well, I hope that they can see this and, like you're saying, that it can give them a little bit more fortitude to say, okay, I need to speak out as well because I seen this, this, and this, and yeah, like this is a situation that needs intervention. Like we need some
Hmm.
resolution. At
Right.
least move with this situation
Hmm.
and we just
Yep.
don't have it yet. So, look, I mean, anybody out there that sees this, like, now's the time to come forward with this information about what's going on in the Georgia Department of Corrections. And that's just it is what it is. Like, people can be mad about it or whatever, but the way I see it anyway, as long as I got the truth on my side and that I'm acting in good faith, like I'm not trying to be malicious about anything. I'm not trying to necessarily attack anybody unjustly anyway. And I'm just trying to do the right thing. That as long as you operate in that uh, lane, that you'll be fine. And that's just the way I see it. So it's where I try to
Mm-hmm.
operate. And yeah, we're not two disgruntled employees. I mean, you're really looking at two of the two people that was setting records in Georgia. Like, I know you were the youngest captain and deputy warden. I was the youngest cert commander and training lieutenant. And then I could have been the youngest captain. I was actually offered the captain position at Dodge State Prison when I was 22. So I would have been a captain of Dodge State Prison at 22 years old if I had taken that, but I didn't. And that was while I was at Valdosta. And it was because I kind of already made up my mind that I didn't want to go up into that I didn't want to go past lieutenant, at least not right now. Like back then, I was thinking maybe in a couple years when some some better management gets in at the high level, maybe I'll try to go on up. But the way I seen him dogging Forbes when he was the captain at Valdosta and several other people,
Yeah.
and the unit managers and stuff too, and the way I seen him putting them in these positions that, like you say, that like this is a bad position to even be in. I was just like,
Hmm.
man, I'm not doing it, you know. And at the time, I was thinking maybe in a few years, then I'll go ahead. But oh, the
Man,
stuff just kept getting worse. So
man, Forbes told me something that is still funny when I remember. We were in a supervisor meeting, and he starts off the supervisor meeting. Hey guys, this ain't, this ain't personal. This is just business. If I chew you out about something, like it's not personal. And even if I'm really frustrated and I happen to cuss at you a little bit, don't consider it me cussing you out. But if I am cussing you out, it is what it is. I get cussed out every day. It is what it is. I'm like, bro, you get cussed out every day. That's not normal, bro.
he had to
but
do
he's
his that. Man.
but
He
but
might have been.
but no. He wasn't that. I mean, to a degree, an exaggeration, but he's not. The point taken, because as captain, like you really get hit with everything. That was the toughest position that I worked in ever, any job ever, when I was a captain at
Yeah,
Altry. And Altry probably wasn't even as challenging as Valdosta as far as the population and what all you're dealing with. So, man, that was a tough job.
yeah.
You you're getting it from
I've
both
seen it.
sides.
I've seen it break a few people, man. Like
Yeah,
real stuff. Like break them psychologically or whatever. Like maybe not permanently, but while they was in that position and while they were
hmm
under all that, then it just I've seen people's health decline. I was like,
yeah.
man,
I'm in.
that's why I
I'm
told him, no, it ain't time for me yet.
I'm included in that because I gained probably about 20 pounds while I was working as a captain. I was getting no sleep. I was stressed out to the max.
Yeah.
It really, I didn't start feeling better until I left and went to Florida. And and there, I mean, you're working 16-hour shifts and long hours and stuff, but like it's a different kind of you know routine. Like you're not, as an officer, I mean, that once you've worked in like upper management, being an officer is fairly easy. Like, yeah, there's stuff you got to do and whatnot, but that's not a job for everyone. I'm not for the people that are not corrections. Like, I'm not saying that being a correctional officer is easy. It's not. I'm saying once you've mastered, the different levels of management, being an officer is fairly easy. So that level of stress was just so much lower than what I was dealing with, man. I was sleeping at night. I was eating better, and it's that was a tough position, dog. That captain position, that it really will break you. It will. I was angry all the time. I mean, I couldn't maintain a good relationship with any kind of woman that I dated. It was tough, man. And you're not making any money to boot. That's another thing. When I left Georgia, like it's not like I was leaving a lot of money on the table.
Nope.
You talk to people in Florida. They're leaving in Florida. Their AWs in Florida are making like 90K, and that doesn't even sound like a ton, but like that's like 20K more than Georgia deputy wardens are paying, and their wardens are making like 115, 120K, and they still get the house and all the fixings that Georgia wardens get.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would anybody
Which is
want to
a
be
good
a
thing. Like that in my mind, that was for at least until toward the end, that was my thoughts. Like that was kind of where I wanted to get to, to
yeah
be a warden, you know. And because I like the idea of staying on the on the prison property and everything and being right there.
yeah
You don't
yeah
gotta go, but the half a
yeah
mile to get to work and all that. I was like,
yeah.
yeah, I could
All
do
the
that.
all the prestige and all the benefits that come with those positions, even in the deputy warden position, getting to wear nice clothes and everybody calling you sir and all that kind of shit. It was nice, you know what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, that's not what you do it for. If you truly want to make a difference, that stuff's just all kind of like a side story. The real story is like, hey, I'm in this position to so that what I say matters. See, that's what, when you want to get into upper management, it should be, hey, I know what I'm doing and I can make a change. So let me get to a point where, where what I say matters, where people have to listen to what I have to say. And if I have confidence in myself and my ability to, to build a culture, then I can make a difference. But can't really do that in Georgia though, because everybody around you and above you is against you. So
Yeah, and literally will hate you when you start talking some stuff like what you just talking about. Oh, make a difference, and we're gonna change some things, and we're gonna do this and that. It's like, man,
I sat
it's
out, I sat down with my warden, close to before I left, and I just sat down and said, "Sir, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what are we? What what line are we holding? What purpose are we serving? Because from what it looks like to me, like we're just acting like everything's normal, like we're just acting like everything's okay, but it's not. Like I mean, it used to be tough to sleep at night, wondering like what's going on at the prison, like when I'm not there, like is so and so going to be able to run this shift, with this amount of people? I'm like, I truly felt like I needed to be out there all the time, but you can't because you got to sleep and you got to have a personal life. You got children, but man, it's glad I'm out of that agency though, because they got some work to do to fix that agency.
100%. Well, let's hope that somebody does it, even if it's not the people that are there now. Let's hope that something happens for the sake of all these thousands of people that are affected by something either being done or not being done.
Right. No, let's hope, man.
But
We done spent 2 hours, man. That's crazy.
yeah, I know it. Hey, man, I like that. I appreciate you. I'll be in touch, man. We'll definitely connect off air about the Atlanta Journal Constitution girl lady, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, appreciate you. You have a good night.
All right, you too, bud.